Sethkari sat in the cold metal chair, his forearms bound with energy chains that hummed softly in the silent room. The tribunal chamber stretched before him like a vast cavern, filled with representatives from dozens of alien species. Their eyes watched him with mixtures of curiosity and disgust. He was the survivor they all wanted to hear from, the one who had lived through humanity's wrath. The lead judge, a tall being with skin like polished stone, leaned forward. "Commander Sethkari of the Velothian Imperial Navy, you stand accused of war crimes against the species known as humans. Before we proceed with charges, the tribunal wishes to hear your account of the conflict." Sethkari's throat made a clicking sound that passed for laughter among his people. "War crimes? You want to know about war crimes? Let me tell you about fighting humans. Let me tell you why half my fleet never came home." He closed his large, dark eyes and remembered. 6 months ago he had been proud. The Hegemony Alliance controlled most of the galaxy. 12 powerful species working together, conquering world after world. They had never failed to bring a primitive species to heel. Earth was supposed to be just another easy victory. "We detected them first through their radio signals," Sethkari began, his voice growing stronger. "Crude broadcasts leaking into space, music, news, entertainment programs. We listened for months, learning their languages, studying their culture. They seemed so fractured, always fighting each other over resources, territory, beliefs. We thought this would make them weak. The intelligence reports had been clear. Humans were a young species barely reaching into space. They had simple rockets, basic weapons, and governments that could barely agree on anything. The hegemony. War planners estimated complete conquest within 2 standard months. Admiral Kretuk called them the Screaming Apes, Sethkari continued. He said they would surrender as soon as they saw our ships. We had conquered species far more advanced. The Xanthari had energy shields. The Morphians could shapeshift. The Cleath had telepathic powers. But humans, they had nothing special. Just crude technology and loud voices. The first contact attempt came when Commander Jake Sullivan of the Human Defense Force sent a transmission to the Hegemony fleet. Sethkari remembered watching the recording. Sullivan was a typical human male, shorter than most Velothians with pale skin and brown hair. He spoke calmly into the camera, offering to negotiate. "We come in peace," Sullivan had said. "We're willing to discuss terms, to find a way for our species to coexist. We have much to offer in trade and friendship." The hegemony commanders had laughed. What could such primitive beings possibly offer? The decision was made quickly. No negotiations, no mercy. Complete conquest was the only option. "We started with orbital bombardment," Sethkari said, his voice growing quieter. "Standard procedure. Destroy their military installations, their communication centers, their power sources. Force them to surrender before ground operations begin. It always worked before." The first wave of attacks targeted major military bases around Earth. Missiles rained from space, turning concrete and steel into smoking craters. Hegemony forces expected the human governments to broadcast surrender messages within hours. Instead, something else happened. Captain Lisa Morgan commanded one of Earth's orbital defense platforms. When Sethkari's forces attacked, her station was outnumbered 50-1. The platform's weapons were primitive projectile cannons compared to the aliens' energy beams. Any sane commander would have evacuated immediately. Lisa Morgan was not any commander. She kept firing, Sethkari said, and the tribunal noticed his hands trembling slightly. Her platform was breaking apart around her, hull breaches everywhere. Half her crew was dead, her weapons were overheating, and she kept firing. The battle recording showed the human platform spinning slowly in space, pieces of it floating away with each alien hit. But the weapons never stopped. Morgan's voice came through the communications array, calm and clear even as explosions rocked. Her station. "All stations, this is Defense Platform 7. We are taking heavy damage but maintaining fire. Do not break formation. Make them pay for every inch." When the platform finally exploded, it took 3 hegemony ships with it. The humans had somehow overloaded their reactor and turned their own station into a massive bomb. It was the first sign that this war would be different. The ground assault should have been simple, Sethkari continued. Drop troops in major cities, secure government buildings, capture leaders. Standard occupation protocol. But when our forces landed, the humans were ready. Lieutenant Alex Carter had been a simple police officer in Chicago before the invasion. When alien ships appeared over his city, he should have run. Instead, he organized the civilians around him. Within hours, every building in his sector had become a fortress. The hegemony ground forces were equipped with energy weapons and advanced armor. They expected to face frightened civilians and scattered military units. Instead, they found humans who had turned their entire city into a weapon. They used everything, Sethkari said, his voice filled with something that might have been respect. Construction equipment became tanks. Delivery trucks became mobile weapon platforms. They turned their underground transportation tunnels into supply routes we couldn't track. Carter's forces didn't fight like any army the hegemony had ever faced. They didn't hold territory or defend strategic points. Instead, they flowed through the city like water, appearing to strike and then vanishing before counterattacks could be organized. We would secure a building, and they would collapse it on us. We would advance down a street, and they would attack from the sewers beneath our feet. Every human civilian was a potential enemy. Every building was a potential trap. The worst part was their communication. Other species the hegemony had conquered would eventually stop coordinating as their command structures collapsed. Humans seemed to coordinate through pure instinct. When one group was destroyed, others would immediately adjust their tactics. Captain, Morgan's final transmission had been broadcast across every human communication network. Tell them we were here. Tell them we fought. Those words became a rallying cry. Every human seemed to know them. Every human seemed willing to die for them. We thought we were fighting an army, Sethkari said, looking directly at the tribunal. Judges. We were wrong. We were fighting an entire species that had decided to go to war. Every human was a soldier. Every human city was a battlefield. And they were just getting started. The tribunal chamber was silent. Finally, the stone-skinned judge spoke. Continue, Commander. Tell us about the real war. Sethkari nodded grimly. The real war hadn't even begun yet. The tribunal waited as Sethkari gathered his thoughts. His scarred face showed the weight of memories he wished he could forget. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. You want to know about the real war? It lasted 8 months on the ground. 8 months of hell that broke the minds of soldiers who had conquered a dozen worlds. We called it the meat grinder because it consumed everything we fed into it. The hegemony had expected Earth's conquest to take weeks. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a grinding war of attrition that grew worse each day. The humans didn't just fight back. They adapted. They learned. They became something the galaxy had never seen before. After the first month, our supply lines started disappearing. Sethkari continued. Not destroyed in battles, just gone. Trucks would leave base camps and never arrive at their destinations. Search teams would find burnt wreckage with no sign of the attackers. Sergeant Nina Brooks had been a military engineer before the invasion. When the aliens landed, she went underground with a small team of specialists. Their mission was simple: make the enemy pay for every meal, every bullet, every breath of air they took on Earth. Brooks understood something the aliens didn't. Modern armies needed constant supplies to function. Cut off those supplies and even the most advanced force would collapse. She started small, hitting isolated convoys with improvised explosives. But Nina Brooks was a fast learner. She studied. Our vehicles, Sethkari said, his 4 hands clenched into fists. Captured our equipment. Within weeks, her people were using our own technology against us. They took our communication devices and learned to intercept our orders. They stole our weapons and reverse-engineered our ammunition. The breakthrough came when Brooks's team captured a damaged hegemony hover tank. Instead of trying to repair it, they took it apart piece by piece. They studied every component, every circuit, every piece of alien engineering. Then they built copies using human materials and manufacturing techniques. The first time we saw humans driving our own vehicles, we thought it was impossible, Zeth said. Our technology was centuries beyond theirs. But they didn't need to understand how it worked, they just needed to make it work. Brooks turned her small team into a training center. She taught other resistance groups how to use captured alien technology. More importantly, she taught them how to think like their enemies, how to predict alien tactics, how to turn the invaders' own strengths against them. The humans had a saying, Zeth continued. Know your enemy. We thought we knew them. We were wrong. They knew us better than we knew ourselves. The situation became critical during the siege of Denver. Colonel Ryan Foster commanded the city's defense with a mixed force of military units and civilian volunteers. The hegemony committed 3 full divisions to take the city, expecting to crush the defenders in a matter of days. Foster had other plans. Denver was supposed to be a simple operation, Zeth explained to the silent tribunal. Surround the city, demand surrender, occupy the government buildings. We had done it 1,000 times on other worlds, but Foster turned the entire city into a weapon. The colonel understood urban warfare in ways the aliens couldn't comprehend. He had studied every building, every street, every underground tunnel in Denver. When the siege began, he was ready. The humans didn't defend the city, Zeth said, his voice growing stronger with remembered frustration. They used it. Every building was a fortress. Every street was a killing zone. Every tunnel was a highway for their troops. Foster's forces moved through Denver like ghosts. They would appear on one side of the city to launch an attack, then vanish underground and emerge miles away. The aliens found themselves chasing shadows while their own forces were picked apart by snipers and saboteurs. We controlled the surface during the day, Zeth continued. But at night the city belonged to them. They moved through sewers, subway tunnels, maintenance shafts, places our soldiers couldn't fit or didn't know existed. The turning point came when Major Kate Phillips took command of the city's evacuation. While Foster fought the aliens in the streets, Phillips organized the systematic removal of civilians through underground routes. But she didn't just evacuate people, she evacuated resources. Every time we captured a building, it was empty, Zeth said. No people, no supplies, no equipment. They stripped everything useful and carried it away. When we finally took the city center, we found nothing but empty shells. Phillips had done something unprecedented. She had made the conquest of Denver meaningless. The aliens controlled empty buildings while the humans controlled everything that mattered. The real city had moved underground, beyond the reach of orbital bombardment and alien technology. Then Foster started collapsing buildings on us, Zeth said, and several tribunal members leaned forward in surprise. He would let us occupy a structure, then bring it down with our troops inside. The humans had prepared demolition charges throughout the city before we even landed. The Battle of Denver lasted 3 weeks. The hegemony committed more and more forces to what should have been a minor engagement. Every day brought new casualties, new frustrations, new proof that the humans were unlike any enemy they had ever faced. On the final day, Phillips called in artillery strikes on her own position. Zeth continued. She was surrounded in the city's command center with the last of the civilian evacuation. Instead of surrendering, she directed cannon fire onto the building she was defending. The explosion destroyed the command center and killed Major Phillips along with 50 alien soldiers, but it also completed the evacuation of Denver's population. Every civilian had escaped through the underground network while the aliens were focused on the empty buildings above. We took Denver, Zeth said quietly. We controlled every street, every building, every piece of concrete. But we had lost the war for the city. The humans had saved their people and cost us 3 divisions to capture nothing. Word of Denver spread across the planet through human communication networks. Other cities began copying Foster's tactics. The aliens found themselves fighting for empty victories while the real war moved underground, into spaces they couldn't reach and couldn't understand. That was when we realized the truth, Zeth said, looking directly at the tribunal judges. We weren't fighting soldiers. We were fighting evolution itself. Every battle made them stronger, every defeat taught them something new, and they were learning faster than we could adapt. The tribunal chamber was silent except for the quiet hum of the energy chains around Zethkari's arms. Finally, the lead judge spoke. "Tell us about their counterattack, Commander." Zethkari's eyes closed. That's when the real nightmare began. Zethkari's voice grew colder as he continued his testimony. The tribunal members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They could sense that the worst was yet to come. "For 6 months we thought we were winning," he said. "Yes, the ground war was harder than expected. Yes, the humans were more stubborn than other species, but we still controlled the space around their planet. We still had the advantage. Then everything changed. The change began in the factories and laboratories hidden beneath Earth's major cities. While alien forces fought in the streets above, human scientists and engineers worked day and night in underground facilities. Dr. Amy Foster, Colonel Ryan Foster's younger sister, led the most important project in human history. "We captured one of their scientists early in the war," Zethkari explained. "A young female named Foster. We thought she would break easily under questioning. We thought she would give us information about human military plans. Dr. Foster had been captured during a raid on a research facility outside Denver. The aliens found her in a laboratory filled with pieces of their own technology. Broken weapons, damaged vehicles, fragments of destroyed ships. They assumed she was trying to understand their superior science. They were half right. She wasn't trying to understand our technology," Zethkari said. "She was trying to copy it. When we interrogated her, she asked us questions about our weapons, our ships, our engines. We thought she was just curious. We thought it was harmless to answer. Dr. Foster had a gift that the aliens couldn't comprehend. She could look at any piece of technology and understand not just how it worked, but how to make it work better. During her capture, she memorized every detail of the alien equipment she saw. Every conversation with her captors taught her something new. She escaped after 2 weeks," Zethkari continued. "Just walked out of our maximum security prison like it was nothing. We found out later that she had been studying our security systems the entire time. She knew our procedures better than our own guards." Foster returned to the underground laboratories with a complete understanding of hegemony technology. Within days, she had teams of engineers building copies of alien weapons. Within weeks, they were building improvements. The first human starship appeared 4 months after the invasion began, Zethkari said, his voice filled with disbelief even now. 4 months. It had taken our species centuries to develop faster-than-light travel. They did it in 4 months. Captain Ben Parker commanded that first ship, a crude vessel built from salvaged materials and reverse-engineered alien technology. It looked nothing like the elegant craft of the hegemony. It was rough, angular, covered in weapons that seemed to grow from its hull like mechanical thorns. "We detected it leaving Earth's atmosphere and sent a squadron to intercept," Zethkari said. "Standard procedure. 1 primitive ship against 12 of our finest fighters. It should have been over in minutes." The human ship moved unlike anything the aliens had seen. It didn't follow the careful, precise flight patterns that hegemony vessels used. Instead, it twisted and spun through space like a wild animal, firing weapons in all directions. "Parker didn't fight like a pilot," Zethkari explained. "He fought like someone who had nothing to lose. When his weapons ran out of ammunition, he used his ship as a battering ram. When his engines were damaged, he fired them as improvised rockets. The battle lasted 20 minutes. When it was over, Parker's ship was destroyed, but so were 8 of the 12 hegemony fighters. The remaining alien pilots fled back to their base with reports that sounded impossible. The humans had built a starship that could outfight their most advanced interceptors." "That was just the beginning," Zethkari said. "Within weeks they had dozens of ships. All different designs, all using our own technology against us. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the humans' approach to space warfare. Other species fought according to established rules. They targeted military vessels and avoided civilian areas. They used proportional force and followed diplomatic protocols even during battle. Humans followed no rules at all. Commander Tyler Hayes led the first deep space raid," Zethkari continued. "He took 6 ships and attacked our supply depot at Kepler Station. We had 2 full battleships defending it. He should have been destroyed before he got within weapons range. Hayes had studied the alien battle reports carefully. He understood that the hegemony expected enemies to behave in predictable ways. So he did the unpredictable. Instead of attacking the battleships, he flew straight past them toward the supply depot itself. He loaded his ship with nuclear weapons and crashed it into our fuel storage facility, Zethkari said, his hands trembling with the memory. The explosion destroyed half the station and both battleships. His crew knew it was a suicide mission. They volunteered anyway. The attack on Kepler Station sent shockwaves through the hegemony fleet. No species had ever used suicide tactics against them. The idea that an entire crew would willingly die for a strategic advantage was beyond their understanding. Hayes wasn't finished, Zethkari continued. His other 5 ships were crewed by volunteers who had the same idea. They spent 3 days hunting our patrol ships using their vessels as guided missiles. By the end, they had destroyed an entire task force. Lieutenant Karen West led a different kind of operation. While Hayes was crashing ships into alien facilities, West specialized in boarding actions. She and her Marines would force their way onto enemy vessels and fight through them room by room. Human soldiers are smaller than most of our species, Zethkari explained. We thought this made them weak. We were wrong. It made them dangerous. They could fit into spaces we couldn't defend. They could use our own ship systems against us. West's teams learned to turn alien environmental controls into weapons. They would flood sections of captured ships with toxic gases or freeze the atmosphere in critical areas. They used the aliens' own technology to trap them in their own vessels. She captured Admiral Vexmore's flagship with only 12 soldiers, Zethkari said, and several tribunal members gasped in surprise. Vexmore had been one of the hegemony's most decorated officers. 12 humans against a crew of 800. They took the ship by making it uninhabitable for everyone except themselves. West's Marines had modified their equipment to work in hostile environments that would kill most alien species. They could fight in vacuum, in poisonous atmospheres, in temperatures that would freeze or cook their enemies. Every captured ship became a weapon they could use against the next target. By the 7th month, we weren't hunting them anymore, Zethkari said quietly. They were hunting us. Our own ships, our own technology, turned against us by an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with every battle. The tribunal chamber was silent. Finally, the lead judge spoke. How did it end, Commander? Zethkari looked up with haunted eyes. With the breaking of our empire, the tribunal chamber grew darker as Zethkari reached the final part of his testimony. His voice carried the weight of a broken empire and the fear of a species that had learned what humanity truly was. The breaking of our empire, he repeated slowly. You want to know how 12 species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years were brought to their knees by primitives who had barely reached the stars? I will tell you. The end began with General Paul Stevens and his understanding of what the hegemony truly feared. Other enemies had attacked military targets, fought honorable battles, and accepted defeat when outmatched. Stevens realized that the aliens had never faced an enemy willing to destroy everything they held dear. Stevens didn't just want to win battles, Zethkari explained. He wanted to make us afraid to fight. He studied our homeworlds, our trade routes, our civilian populations. Then he did something that broke every rule of civilized warfare. The general's strategy was simple but terrifying. He would make the cost of continued war so high that the hegemony would have no choice but to withdraw completely. He began by targeting the economic systems that kept the alien alliance functioning. Our empire was built on trade, Zethkari said. 12 species sharing resources, technology, and knowledge. Stevens understood that if he could break those connections, the alliance would collapse. Stevens organized raids on shipping routes that had been safe for centuries. Human ships would appear without warning, destroy entire merchant fleets, then vanish before military forces could respond. But they didn't just attack the ships. They attacked the crews in ways that spread terror throughout the hegemony. Humans broadcast recordings of their attacks. Zethkari continued, his voice growing quieter. They wanted us to see what they were capable of. They wanted us to know that nowhere was safe. The recordings showed human boarding parties systematically destroying cargo vessels. But more disturbing was how they treated the crews. The humans didn't kill their prisoners. Instead, they sent them home with messages carved into their skin. Messages that said the same thing in 12 different languages. Leave human space or face extinction. Fear is a powerful weapon, Zethkari said. Stevens understood that terrified soldiers fight poorly. Terrified civilians demand their governments end the war. He made the entire hegemony afraid. The psychological warfare reached its peak when Admiral Laura Chen led her fleet in a direct assault on the hegemony's core systems. The target was Kethval Prime, the administrative center of the alien alliance. The planet was protected by orbital defense stations and a fleet of over 300 warships. Chen's fleet numbered less than 50 ships, Zethkari said. All of them built from our own captured technology. Logic said the attack was impossible, but humans don't follow logic. Chen had studied every previous human victory and learned from them. She knew that the hegemony expected conventional space battles with predictable tactics, so she gave them something else entirely. The first wave wasn't an attack, Zethkari explained. It was a broadcast. Chen transmitted footage from every human victory, every destroyed alien ship, every failed hegemony operation. She wanted the defenders to know exactly what they were facing. The psychological impact was immediate. The alien crews had heard rumors about the humans, but seeing the evidence was different. They watched their own ships being used against them. They saw their comrades fleeing in terror from human boarding parties. They realized they were fighting an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with each battle. The second wave was worse, Zethkari continued. Chen sent cargo ships loaded with nuclear weapons directly at our defense stations. No pilots, no crew, just automated bombs that we couldn't negotiate with or intimidate. The defense stations were designed to stop military vessels, not suicide attacks. The alien commanders tried to intercept the cargo ships, but the humans had learned to make them look like civilian vessels until the last moment. By the time the defenders realized what they were facing, it was too late. 12 defense stations destroyed in 12 minutes, Zethkari said. Then Chen brought in her real fleet, ships that moved like nothing we had ever seen. They fought like the humans fought everything else, without rules, without mercy, without any concern for their own survival. The Battle of Kethval Prime lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the hegemony's most important world was in ruins. But more importantly, the alliance itself was broken. Species that had fought together for millennia began to question whether the war was worth continuing. The Zenthari were the first to leave, Zethkari said. They had lost half their fleet to human attacks. Their homeworld was demanding withdrawal. Others followed quickly. The Morphians, the Cleith, the Tethani. One by one, the species that made up the hegemony alliance began to pull their forces back to defend their own territories. The great empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds was dissolving because of one primitive species that refused to accept defeat. Admiral Chen sent a final message to the Hegemony Council, Zethkari said. It was simple. Leave our space. Never return. If you do, we will hunt you across the galaxy and destroy everything you have built. The message was backed up by a demonstration. Chen's fleet systematically destroyed every hegemony facility within 50 light-years of Earth. Military bases, research stations, communication relays, all of it reduced to floating debris and radiation. The council voted to end the war, Zethkari said quietly. Not because we couldn't win, but because we couldn't afford to win. The humans had shown us what they were willing to do, what they were capable of. We realized that defeating them would cost us our entire civilization. The withdrawal was complete within 2 months. The hegemony forces that had once seemed invincible fled human space like frightened children. The alliance that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years was broken by a species that had been spacefaring for less than a century. That's why I'm here, Zethkari said, looking directly at the tribunal judges. Not because I'm a war criminal, but because I'm a witness. I've seen what happens when you underestimate humanity. I've seen what they become when they're threatened. The lead judge leaned forward. What is your warning, Commander? Humanity is not like other species, Zethkari said. They don't fight for territory or resources. They fight for survival. And when they fight for survival, they become something the galaxy has never seen before. They become evolution itself. The tribunal chamber was silent for a long moment. Finally, the judge spoke. The charges against you are dismissed, Commander, but your warning is noted. The galaxy will remember what you have told us. Zethkari nodded slowly. I hope so, because if they don't, if anyone else tries to conquer humanity, there might not be a galaxy left to remember anything. The energy. Chains released and Zethkari stood. His testimony was over, but his nightmares would last forever.